Well, a huge welcome to everybody who is joining us from all over the place today. This is our first webinar of our brand new Level Up series, which is series number 4. I can't believe it's series number 4 already. They seem to have flown over. For anybody new joining today, for anybody who doesn't know me or hasn't been involved in one of our webinars prior, I am Lisa, founder of Fabric, which is a marketing training academy built to empower the most ambitious marketers to thrive. The team and I work with the most amazing marketers all over the world on our 12-week program to teach them how to build a marketing and communication strategy from the ground up, whilst also helping build them in confidence, in skills, and so much more. Most of our learners have gone on to secure their first jobs in industry, get their dream promotions, pay rises, and see incredible results for the organizations that they work for. So we really, truly do have the best job in the world here at Fabric. Now, when I set Fabric up some years ago, it was the intention to give marketers all over the globe all of the tools, the knowledge, the insights, the cheats, the advice, the tips that I never had when I was starting out in marketing some 20 years ago. And so our webinar series have been a huge part of that value content that we bring to you, because we find the very best of the best out there doing amazing things, who are very, very kind to share their time and their knowledge with our wonderful community, which is what we're going to be doing today. So all of you who are here know they're completely free to attend, of course, and we're here to share some of the most important insights in the world of marketing with marketing leading industry experts. And today's guest is absolutely no exception to that. On our last series, we had a couple of personal branding webinars as well, similar type of topics. We had Amelia Sordell, who was absolutely brilliant, and Claudia Cardinali, who again was wonderful. And they were really, really popular topics. We've had non-stop requests for more on personal branding. But we all know the power of personal branding now. This isn't new to us anymore. And most of us have been working really hard over the last couple of months or years to really build that profile and personal brand. But what we need to start to think about now is not just how to build that personal brand, but how to use that to move our followers to convert through to customers. So today we are going to be doing this very thing with the very talented and influential Richard Moore, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. Richard has successfully built companies from the ground up by taking ownership of their sales teams. And from here, Richard went on to build his own personal brand, which he uses to share all of his knowledge through lectures and speaking gigs in front of businesses all over the world. Now, I know you guys are desperate for this content. I know, because you've been asking us for some time, so I'm so excited to get started. Tiny little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. Richard and I are going to be chatting over as much as we possibly can in the next 30 minutes or so. And then I'm going to open the floor to you, wonderful people, to start to put your questions to Richard. If you can pop your questions in the Q&A box, that would be wonderful, as opposed to the chat, but do feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves, and the Fabric team will be there to answer questions. So, Richard, thank you so much for joining us for the kickoff of our 4th series.
Lisa, thank you. It was a wonderful introduction. And I just love it when this natural progression is recognized from the branding side and getting that bit right, and essentially attracting an audience, but then doing something with it so that we get some real substantial returns for our efforts, right? And so thanks for welcoming me on.
No, absolutely. And that's what it's all about, of course, isn't it? All the hard work we put into, reach and followers and engagements, it's there because we want to convert those people into a community or into our sales pipeline, and ideally into advocates and lifelong customers. And there's nothing to be shy about with that, right? That's the purpose of doing it. So before we get started with our questions, of which we've got loads to get through, would you tell us a little bit about your journey so far and how you've ended up where you are today?
Yeah, It's a long one. I'm in my 40s now, Lisa, so I've done this for some time. Yeah, so all started, if you like, at university. You wouldn't have expected me to be here, given what I was aiming at. So I did a couple of degrees in history. I really wanted to do a PhD and essentially, you know, wear a sweater and be an academic and lecture all my life. Unfortunately, I didn't get funding, so I had to go and get a job. And the first job I went for is the one I took, which was selling internet marketing in 2002. I know, looking at the audience here, some people were still in nappies at that point. So like really a long time ago, when the internet was known, but not necessarily for spending money on commercially. So it's really nice to have grown up with that. I was in sales roles all through my corporate time in London, ultimately as a sales director at a headhunting company. So what's been really nice is, whilst watching and selling marketing, I've been involved in the sales side and examining and working with and being on the front line using things like cold outreach, phone use, you know, going to trade shows, knocking on doors, and all of that kind of thing. And then when I left the city in 2013 and set up my own consultancy, the focus very much was still helping people to convert. What I identified straight away, and this was selling through popping content on Facebook back in 2013, 2014. It was just interesting that there was so many wonderfully enthusiastic people starting businesses with a great talent, but completely broke. And they're posting all day long and grinding out this machine and writing comments and replying to each other and so on, but never making any money. And I'm like, well, that's the bit I know I can help with, without being, you know, an irritating salesy person. And what has been really valuable is taking that from that moment with Facebook, then Instagram, and then from 2018 with LinkedIn, and showing people what elegance looks like when it comes from moving content from an audience that's maybe passively just consuming it in there as they thumb through a newsfeed, to saying things like, yeah, I'd be quite interested in learning a bit more, please. And then converting that. And for some weird reason, people really like making money, Lee. So I don't know what that is, but so teaching them that has been really, really rewarding, because it's not about making people salespeople. It's about keeping them in their sphere of genius, if you like, but allowing them to understand where the cues are and therefore what they need to do to nudge people in the right way, with no pressure, to wanting to buy from them. So there's a number of things I've done along the way, but essentially that's the route. There's always been a sales thread throughout, but it's really nice to have evolved with the internet, if you like, over the last 20 years. Yeah,
and it's so interesting, because there's this constant debate that's been there forever and a day, and is still very pertinent today, that, you know, this sales is a bit of a dirty word. It's, you know, it's not a great industry to be in. You know, you think back to the days of, you know, your double glazing salesman, and most of our audience might be too young to remember that, but you and I certainly do.
No.
You know, and there was and you know, really underhand selling tactics that happened, you know, in those times. But I mean, sales has to exist for businesses to sustain and to grow. And there is nothing wrong with being brilliant at sales and being really super confident in sales, as long as you've got integrity and do it in the right way, right? And there's this constant discussion about, is sales and marketing one of the same thing, or are they two very separate disciplines? And we often talk about they are very different disciplines, but the two have to work so closely together to be seamless, that if you've got good sales understanding as a marketer, you'll be a better marketer. And if you've got good marketing understanding as a sales professional, you'll be a better sales professional. Really? What's your view on that? Is that...
What's nice is I can speak with authority on this, because I originally worked at a company where, other than probably HR and a CEO and a line manager, the entire workforce was sales. And so doing sales only and going, yeah, we don't need marketers, we'll just work through this yellow pages kind of thing. That can work, but you've got to be incredibly resilient, because most people don't want to know. Then I've worked with a hybrid where essentially there's a marketing function that is generating leads on its own, but there's no meshing with sales. It's like, here's some leads, go call them. They seem to have responded. So there's no kind of symbiosis. They just find leads, send them to sales, and then sales do it. And then there's what I really feel I'm getting really like doing a good job of at the moment, which is a real fusion of the two. And I just want to take a step back, because I'm so pleased you've made this point, and it's because there's an important commentary we have to make. When people say I hate sales, What they really are meaning is, I hate this particular type of sales.
Yep.
And that's just so essential. People understand sales or types of sales. There's a whole spectrum. And at one end, yes, you have the used car salesperson, double glazing vibe. And culturally, that's seen as what sales is. But the other end, you've got attraction-based, content-led, marketing style selling. And I've never found someone who says, I hate sales, who doesn't love it. When someone says, hi, I'd love to buy, or I'd love to learn more about your product, they cannot wait to get on a call with that person. You're still selling. It's just that that person wants it. And it's identical in that we can call it sales, but it's just a different approach. So when people embrace the right kind of sales for them, they suddenly fall in love with it. And it is a dirty word when you allow it to only mean one thing. So I'm so pleased you brought that up. It's really important.
Yeah, it is. And I think it was just good to set that tone for this particular webinar, because we are touching on both sides, aren't we? We're talking about putting content out there as a marketer, if you like, but we're talking about content that is essentially nurture and then how to convert, which essentially is sales. And marketers can embrace that and then can become brilliant at what they do because they can evidence the results of that, right?
Precisely. And where I come from isn't marketing first, it's sales. And people feel it still, even getting on for 10 years later, there's always that sales director still who's like always thinking, but why are we doing this thing now? Like, what's the point of that action? And branding has a number of reputations. One is like, for those who are progressive enough, it's essential because then people view you in the right way because you're being positioned correctly, and it makes sales far easier. But for others, it's seen as a soft thing, a bit like marketing was 20 years ago. It's like, oh yeah, but we don't need to muck about that with that. But of course, that's for those who don't fully understand it. What's essentially we get is that when you do combine them, you really win. But what's worrying, I have to say, is so much of a lean on branding and marketing, because the reality is, if you reduce it down psychologically, it is a place where there's considerably less risk of social awkwardness and rejection. It is accessible in the sense that you can build a brand, you can get followers. It's a safe place to spend your time. Whereas going out there and daring to ask someone to progress down a sales process is scary for people. And that even grown adults with confidence, it's scary for them. So it's easier to inhabit a space where you're building a brand. But the problem is people build a brand too much almost, although you could argue there's no such thing. But what I mean is spending so much time on it that they're never actually converting. My background is to come at it from a sales-led approach and put marketing and branding on top, but it can totally work the other way around. It's just essential to think, but why am I doing it? Like, what's the end point I'm after? Because the answer is, it isn't for followers and it's not for acclaim. It's to drive a business growth ultimately.
It is. Absolutely. And I can imagine there's so many of our audience are just now like, all right, let's get into it, because this sounds like it's going to be great. So I'm going to get into it. Here we go with some questions to get us set up. We do know that we need to attract the right type of followers. Of course, that's, we all know that. But is there a secret formula of how many times to post and what to post to gain followers who genuinely are interested in you or your brand or your product or service, as opposed to just mass followers who are vanity metrics over real, genuine, customers?
Yeah, I think what's essential is that we take a step back before we post and or even before we begin going to market and say, do I have a handle on what my niche is? Like, and you've probably covered this in previous sessions, and I go as far as calling it a hyper niche, like a super tight niche. And it's not just who am I serving, but what's the message against the symptoms of the problems and frustrations that they have. Because when I speak to that, I'm going to be speaking to the right kind of people. So what we want to be doing is saying, with frequency, can I continually show the correct people that I'm aware of the little things that are really starting to niggle deep down? And when we're there, they'll start thinking, this person gets me. And that's the seed planted. We want to be doing it with the right people. It doesn't matter how many, especially when we're talking high ticket selling. And I would guess, just glancing through the participants here, that the huge numbers are coaches, brand building companies, agencies, and they're doing, you know, at the very least, a 4-figure proposition, right? So with that in mind, you don't need thousands of leads every week. You need a few who are crucially into you. And so that's where the brand part plays an important part. But what we need to be thinking is, each day, are we showing up on their radar? Because the truth is that each day they're online. And I'm going to talk exclusively on LinkedIn on this. On LinkedIn, if people are showing up each day, where's your post? And there's in my opinion, absurd theory going around that you shouldn't post too much because, you know, that will overwhelm them, which is nonsense for those who are really into you because they want to binge you.
Yeah.
There has to be balance. And so 2 years ago, algorithmically, if I posted and then posted again later that day on LinkedIn, it would kill the previous post. Now that's changed, and more than one post can kind of exist at the same time.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because I test a lot, what's worked really well is simply a post a day. And rather than moving on to the next one so swiftly, what I've done instead is say, let's start this conversation. And that's today's conversation. And it lasts about a day. And as people are responding and replying and commenting, so I'm jumping in and being part of that and, you know, keeping the flywheel going, really. So daily makes sense. And doing it every couple of days or like 3 times a week, you do run the risk of falling off people's radar. Yeah. And of course, people are going to buy you because they're into you, but they may buy others simply because they're front of mind that much more.
Yeah.
You know? So it's crucial to remember that.
I love that advice in terms of start your post in the intention that it's a conversation for the entire day and then start again the next day. I mean, how much time do you typically spend on LinkedIn in a day? I mean, what type of time do you put into that?
It's a very good question. So first up, all my assets are made by the team, so I don't do that part. And that originally would have taken extra time. But because text only posts perform so well, I don't have to do too much in terms of like production on a video or anything like that. So to be clear, there's a number of things I do in the day, and I chunk time specifically for that to start and end that task. And I'll break it down in a sec, but cumulatively, I'd say it's maybe an hour and a half online, and that's it. That's all in. And that includes crack of dawn, in my pajamas, before I've had breakfast, Lisa, writing the post. And I mean, people were like, oh, why don't you batch it? I really like being in a creative space first thing. I think it's healthy for us as humans. So I start the day writing the post. So that may be 20 minutes, half an hour of it. Yep. Then I babysit it for a bit. So I will respond to comments, and I will have another period later that day when I go back and do the same, because you're rewarded as a user and author of a post if you return and respond to comments. You're rewarded with more distribution. But I also have a period of time where I go to other people's content and I respond to theirs, because it's good to be a useful part of the audience. But when I do that, I'm like, right, it's 10:15, half an hour, you're doing 10 comments. And so as I'm writing the comment, and I'm not writing nice post, mate, I'm writing something meaningful and tagging people and, you know, perpetuating conversations on other people's posts. Once I've done that, I hit, you know, comment, click enter, and then I'm like, right, 1, next one, 2, 3. And once I've done 10, close the browser and get on with your life. Mucking about on social media all day means you're bloating this task so much that you start conditioning yourself that you don't have much time in the day for other stuff, which is rubbish. When you do, you can be very effective up until a point, I believe. Then it's time to get off the train. The problem for people is it's addictive, isn't it? But we have to be the real boss of these things rather than being pulled along by potential dopamine hits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, again, just such crucial advice, because particularly as marketers, you know, we're constantly juggling so many tasks. And when you put a post out and you start to see it's getting real traction, there's that fear that you're going to miss out on an important comment, or that, you know, there's a conversation happening without you. And so there is this fear that you need to be checking in almost every 20 minutes to make sure that you're on the ball. And I love the discipline around, you know, initial task setting, initial comments, take a break, switch it off. I mean, do you have notifications switched off?
100%. I've gone as far as if I was to go to YouTube right now, I've got a special thing installed, so it's a blank screen. So I have no algorithmic feed. I have, what do I consciously want to search for? I don't need notifications, because with my mobile, I only choose to use it when I choose to use it. Yeah. And this is just a message. I know this feels off piece, but this is still part of it, because discipline, as you rightly said, is everything here. If you all feel that you're the boss here, running your own company, ask yourself, are you really the boss when the notification goes off? Do you suddenly drop everything and run to the beck and call of your phone? So it's really interesting this. When you're really in command, it feels quite liberating. Yeah. Ask yourself, first thing in the morning, do I roll over and check other people's agenda in the form of notifications? Or do I decide when it's time to look at it? So I don't actually look at my phone's notifications for a couple of hours in the morning, because I'm doing other things. I want to win the morning. And then I've chosen, now's the time to look at emails, now's the time to look at notifications, and then it's time to close it. So this was actually featured in Forbes 4 years ago. It was an article written about this idea of mine called the when to-do list. So it's not just a to-do list, it's I'm doing it at this time, and crucially, I'm ending that task at this time. Yeah. So even if I'm enjoying it and doing really well, it's time to stop, because now I've got this other thing to do as well. So again, it's discipline. If you really want to do great things, you need to be able to do that. Otherwise, your day gets taken over somewhat, doesn't it?
It does completely. And for me, one of the best things I ever did was switch notifications off a year or so ago, because you can't quite condition your brain, I don't think, when something's pinging on your phone, not to be interested in looking.
And does it really matter? Like, has there ever been one where it's like, wow, that's so essential? I mean, it just typically isn't that urgent. So it's worth kind of learning or evolving yourself away from it.
Definitely. Great. Okay, so thinking about, I guess, next steps in the process, we've got followers, people are now following us, they're binging us, they're loving what we put out there. I guess, what is the next step to start building more than just conversations, those real kind of early stage relationships with a mass of people where you want to try and get quite intimate? How do you go about that?
And you're right, the word's intimate here. We want to recognize that, and again, let's talk high ticket, because if it's exceedingly low ticket, well, there should be a website that you go sell themselves. But 4-figure and up, so like $1,000 or pound point price point and upwards, what we want to recognize is we need to get the individual one-on-one. So this is nurture now. And what we need to look for is what I call the buckets. So where are the buckets where these potential leads can be identified? If we talk about LinkedIn, there are essentially 4 main buckets you can bear in mind. People think there's 1, maybe 2, but there are 4. So 1, of course, sure, your inbox, there might be some DMs, but your inbox doesn't light up all day long with people saying, hey, I want to buy, please. That's like the very tip of the iceberg. And if you get one there, good for you, but that's not where you build your strategy. Second one people look for is comments on a post. Of course, that's really handy, but we want to go further than that. So there's also comments and reactions, but there's also people who follow you. So if I do a great post, then people will click follow, and then I can go to followers and see who in chronological order, so who's recently decided to follow me. But the other one, where the real deals tend to be, where the buyers are, is the lurkers who just look at you.
Yeah.
Humans are voyeurs, right? And they don't want to put their head up above the parapet and engage too much in comments. And in fact, senior decision makers tend to not spend their day, funnily enough, mucking about writing comments. They tend to just look at who you are, they click on your profile, and then they're gone. But the beautiful thing is, on your profile, there's a section that says who's viewed your profile. When Facebook first came out, they had this and they got rid of it. So because they knew that people would want to look at each other without being busted for it. Yeah. This is so powerful, because what you've got is the people who are looking and then going. And it's a massive tell if someone's seen your content and then clicked on your profile, then disappeared, and you can see who they are. So to answer your question directly, what we want to be doing next is identifying in these 4 buckets who these people are. Like, be fussy, because you'll only get more the next day. So who are the ones you want to engage with? Who look decent? Who are in the right country?
Yep.
You know, for currency conversion, don't pitch a country where probably your prices are going to break them. So go to the right kind of location as well. Think about job title. And then we want to isolate the thing that they did. And here is the beautiful part, because we don't want to do cold outreach. No one wants that, do they? Instead, we want to focus on the thing that they did. And that is our in. So basically, so this is probably the most important part of this entire process, is moving them from passive second connection, like an audience member who is a bit of a lurker, to someone who is engaged. When we send a cold message to someone, they're like, oh, I don't want to do this, thanks, I'm not interested. When we have something in common, it's far easier.
Yeah.
And an example I've given is, for instance, if you and I sat next to each other at a wedding, but we didn't know each other, then the obvious question is like, so how do you know the bride or groom?
Yeah.
And then we're off, we're fine, we get on because we've got that thing in common. Like, you know, there's no barriers because we presume we're cool with each other because we know the bride and groom.
Yeah.
And it's something similar here. When there's commonality, that's great leverage and it brings the barriers down. So the commonality, or the thing you can talk about, is the thing they just did. So for instance, and let's get practical and tactical now. If someone looks at my profile today and I feel that they're of value, I can send them a connection note. So I can connect, because I want to connect with them, surely. I can send them a note and say, hey, Lisa, I just saw you checked out my profile. Thank you so much. Out of interest, was there anything that caught your eye?
Yep. And I can vouch for this, because you did this with me to a T when I connected with you to invite you to be a guest on our webinar. So, you know, in practice, I was absolutely bowled over by the first instant message that I got. And even though I was coming to you for something anyway, which maybe these lurkers are, it was just that first instant connection of, this guy knows what I want, he's there, and he's kind of opened his arm to welcome me, and it feels like this is going to be a great start to a great relationship.
Now the crucial part is that you've got two other options which are terrible, and I want to say these so that people don't do it. The other option is ignore them, because just because someone could buy from you and you might be right for them doesn't mean they're going to step forward. Only the bold, or those with lots of money and feeling good, or the desperate will get in touch. The lurkers are really, like, honestly, probably 80%, probably more of my buyers, I never knew who they were. They're second connection lurkers. So you need to reach out. And then the other side is you do reach out, but you spam them with, hey, I know, Lisa, that you'd like to see my webinar or my downloadable, and you've just killed it to start with. So say hi, acknowledge the thing they did, and then ask why they did it, or what in particular stood out. And the same goes for a post. Hey, thanks so much for checking out the post today, because they liked it or something. What made you decide to like it? Or what, when they vote in a poll, right? They've done it. They voted in my poll. Hi, Lisa, thanks. I just want to say thanks so much for voting in the poll today. Isn't that a wonderful way to start? And then just out of interest, what made you vote for that?
Yeah.
And a few will be like, well, actually, it's this. And then we can probe, well, why do you think that's a problem? Well, because I need help with this thing. Okay, I know I can help with this, and then we're off. So just every day you've got those. And if you only did 5 a day, these are really, really targeted, fairly qualified inbounds that you can make use of. An inbound doesn't have to be someone emailing you, say, can I buy, please? An inbound is someone who's done something in your direction. And that level of trust is off the charts by comparison to when you reach out first. So let them come to you and then work with that. They're right there. The leads are right there. People think they don't have leads because they're looking at the inbox, but check out your profile views at the very least. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I love that because it's so simple, right? It's so simple. We can all do that. When do you start to decide to connect? Do you make the connection request before the message goes? Do you do the message first and then make the connection request if there's conversation?
It's a really good point. So you've got to remember that if this doesn't go anywhere, there's still an upside to be had. And what I mean by that is, if we don't end up doing anything together, I still potentially have a connection here who might be really into me. And if there's a bit of back and forth in the DMs, LinkedIn will now send you my content.
Yeah.
Because LinkedIn says, well, they seem to be getting on. Perhaps Lisa wants to see more of his content. Lo and behold, the next day, your newsfeed will have my latest post. And guess what? Now you're being warmed up. Maybe you're just further out on the conveyor belt and you're going to be warmed up by seeing the content. And it might be 3 months' time that you're like, do you know what? The time is right. I've been sold in. I want to get in touch with this person again. And so the worst case scenario is you keep that person as a great connection. So yes, if you've identified someone you potentially could work with, worst case, they're going to be a great connection who might be interested in your content. So send them a connection note. Do not send an in-mail, because an in-mail basically screams at them, this looks like I'm trying to sell you. It's like when someone sees a post that says sponsored or promoted or advert, you have a conditioned response to it. So what we want to do is simply go to their profile, do this on the website, not the app, because otherwise it won't work as well. Click on connect. And when you click on connect, it will give you an option. Do you want to send a note? And you send them this, you send them that note. So a really nice welcome. Thanks so much for looking at my profile, voting my poll, commenting on my post. Just out of interest, why did you do the thing you did? And so we're isolating the thing they did. We're calling them on it. Well, we saw you did it. What made you do that? And someone will be like, I just needed more of that. It was really inspiring. It was really helpful. That's where my problem is, whatever it is. And now we're away. It's really straightforward from there.
Brilliant. I love that. I think that's, and it's once you've got some discipline again around, choose 5 for the day and do it at this particular time in the morning, we can manage this in our daily schedules quite easily without feeling this whirlwind of overwhelm and juggling too many tasks. Yeah.
And in fact, if we were to take the option of spamming out as many messages as possible, we're then sifting through all this trash where the approach was wrong, so they didn't really want to hear from us anyway. And there's too much to work with. People need to understand, unless you have to get hundreds of deals every month, which you don't, it's like for you, often as a consultant or a coach or an entrepreneur, you only need several deals. And so work the low volume instead, but go deep with these people. And these individuals, it's really not hard to peel them off into a conversation when you start it like a human. Hey, great to see you. And why did you do that thing is a very reasonable way to start a conversation. And they tend to answer it.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so now we're in conversation with these people, which is where we want to be. I guess, where is what process, and I'm probably starting to move into more sales than marketing here, but what is the process there in terms of the nurture piece? Do you tend to keep that in LinkedIn? Do you tend to move that offline then? What if we're wanting to convert these people into customers, which is our goal, what's the next step to nurture past that first initial interest?
So we need to map back from where we're at our best chance of getting a deal. So they're going to be at their emotional high and top in their buying zone when they are on a call with us and feeling really sold, right? So we want, for most people listening, probably we want to get them on that call. Now, the DMs are a place where magic happens, but we need to get the heck out of the DMs fast. Because what happens is if you overdo the questions, it starts becoming this interrogation, and they kind of pop out of the trance of, oh, it was nice to meet you, and move to like, sorry, why are there all these questions? Like, what's all this about? Because then it becomes intrusive. So you need to get the cadence right, and it needs to be not too little and not too many. So really, it's back and forth, perhaps 3 times. So 3 messages from you and from them. Then it's time to pivot. And essentially what we've got is recognize, say hi, and recognize what they did, get them to respond. And when they respond, we want to probe deeper on that. Okay. So, oh, I was looking at your profile because I was interested in someone who could help with LinkedIn conversion. Can you see at this moment, it's the people who might get excited, go, oh, well, I can help with that. And then jump on a call with them. It's far better just to bring them in a little bit further. So we're looking for a little bit more commitment from them, not to us, but to their problem. So I want them to, it's called turning the knife in selling, or like, it sounds awful, but basically like stirring the pain a bit, making them talk a bit more about where the issue is. So what you're doing is you're then saying, so why is that an issue? And it's for those taking notes, it's a what or a why based question. Oh, I'm looking for someone or looking for help with content conversion. Why is that an issue? Or what makes that something you need to focus on, would you say? And their response will tend to be, I don't even know. I just don't seem to know what I'm doing. Often they give you something like that. Or it might be, along the lines of like, well, I've been trying everything, or my team's struggling, or whatever it is. And remember, not everyone's going to do this, but some will.
Yeah.
And when they share that, the moment they share that, you've got them.
Yeah.
Because what that means is they've decided to look up to you and see you as something of an expert. Nobody shares a struggle unless they want that person to help them.
Yeah.
You ever notice if you ask someone, are you okay? Like, yeah, I'm fine. People are happy to open up to those they feel they can open up to. This is about social worry and stuff like that. It's all where it comes from. So what's interesting is that when they do open up, you know that they're seeing you as an expert who potentially can help. So this is your chance now. And so my suggestion here is to go one more question, and which would be a great question here would be something like, so what do you feel you need? Or what is it you feel you need to do?
Yeah.
And this is moving towards what I call the doctor method, which is my approach. So the doctor method, if you can picture a doctor, when the patient walks in, what the doctor says to them is, so what can I help you with? Or what do you feel the problem is? And it's like the doctor knows best, right? He knows how to diagnose, but he wants to hear that patient's point of view first to gather information. And that's all we're doing.
Yeah.
And the doctor doesn't, when you walk in that room, it doesn't suddenly say, I'll be able to fix you. I'll be able to fix you. They're playing the role of the consultant, which is what we must do too. And it's a whole other conversation, but essentially what we need to do is make ourselves the prize. They are not the prize, we are. Yeah. And when we are seen as the person that they might get to work with, we position ourselves, and this is back to previous sessions you probably had, as the person that they should choose rather than shopping around. That's where negotiation stops happening. That's where discounts don't happen. That's where people are happy to pay full price because they chose you. So really at that point, to kind of tie it all together, when you've asked that second question to probe a bit deeper, and they're like, they usually come up with like, I don't even know, Rich. I just need some kind of guidance or something like that. You simply say, look, I know I'm really good at this part. Would you like to explore what it would look like if I helped you? And they say yes, because of the process they've been through. They all say yes. Great. Look, I've got 5 minutes or 10 minutes tomorrow at this time. Let me know if that works in the best email for a Zoom call, and let's get them in. So you want to close them rapidly on the call, like getting them on a call. Don't send them stuff.
Yeah.
Terrible idea, because you want them on the call because that is where the connection can be built properly. And people by people that they like, not people by people. And so when you get them on that call, they have a chance to bed in with you, and you can ask them more questions, play that role of the doctor, and then diagnose not just the problem, but then prescribe a solution. So I'm going fully on doctor here for you, but that's essentially the model there. So it's content to warm, a moment in the DMs, and then focus on the call. And that should be your process, not non-stop messages, because yes, you can close in the DMs, it is harder, but you really want to get them onto the call, because then they'll feel much more open with a real human being, and your opportunity to close is far higher that way.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, everybody will get this recording. I'm sure that either people are scribbling frantically or might like to go back and review this, but I think that's such important advice, and actually so doable. It's not this black art of a really complex and scientific nurture journey. It's just some very sensible discipline and steps around how
identifying cues and responding correctly to them. And that's why like random people with no sales experience are doing really well, because they're just simply following that process well. So it's nice that it's accessible to all.
Amazing. Okay, I am going to open up to some questions from our wonderful audience. So if you have been holding on to a question and you're desperate to get it to Richard now, pop it in the Q&A box for me. If you have already done that, I'm going to start working through these now, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we possibly can as we go. So, Richard, I've got 3 questions from one of our audience here. So they've been a bit cheeky by squeezing all 3 in, but we'll give
naughty.
So the first question is, when is it time to hire someone for you to do your posts?
Well, that's a contentious question. Okay, so it's a difficult one. It depends on your service. Okay, if you are the product, so I'm looking now at coaches who are the product, for instance, and those kind of people who trade off their personal brand, literally them being the thing that's being bought. you really need to consider if you actually need to be getting someone else to do your posts. If you can articulate something yourself, you'll probably do it better than most. But it depends. You need to play to your strengths, right? Sometimes, like I right away, I got people to do the graphics because it's shocking. It's a car crash when I try and do it. So that was early on, for instance. And there are agencies. One of my businesses is a content agency, for instance. And so for some, it's like, I'm just not, basically, I won't do it at all, or someone does it for me.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, as an evolution to end up with someone doing your posts, I don't know if it's necessary. It's a really hard question to answer. For me, I expect I will probably always write my posts.
Yeah.
Sure, it's because I'm good at them, but also because I want to articulate my thoughts and values. If you can hire a marketing agency who can really care and therefore tap into your IP, but also how you feel about things and articulate that correctly, go crazy.
Yeah.
But what you cannot expect is that someone outsourcing posts means that you don't have to show up. Because if you want to close deals with individuals that are going to get you 20, 30, 50K a year, you kind of should show up for that individual. So it's very few people who are so out of time that they can't show up a bit each day to engage with the individuals, unless you're, you know, Richard Branson building a thought leader kind of brand, not looking commercially for anything, just simply being a great guy. So sure, let someone write them for you. It's a really difficult question, that. I hope that gives some sense of it. So I would always push back. I would say you probably need to write them yourself. And that's probably one thing that you should be doing personally. But if not, you know, if you're not going to be writing posts because you're better at X, well, so straight away then.
Yeah. And I think what part of it, I mean, you have to respond to comments yourself, right? I mean, that's just a no to outsource for me, because how is anybody going to get in your mind so quickly?
Exactly.
And so, you know, right in the moment of that conversation, you know, you've got to be able to just put your knowledge, your, you know, your opinion, your, you know, your thoughts and feelings right there. You know, that can't be handled by somebody else. So if that's going to be handled by you, really, the ideation of the post, maybe, you know, that works well if somebody generating ideas for the post, but I think the content writing and the comments, for sure, it's much more authentic. And for me, that's where you really learn about your audience. It's where you really get to know them. So it's gold dust insight, really.
And look, until you're getting 50, 80 comments on a post, you do have time. And a good hybrid, if you're desperate to, you know, recognize that every comment is potentially another kick in the algorithm, is so get your VA carefully to, if you must, have them respond on your behalf. Get them to respond to the ones that are like nice post mate, so that you're having some perpetuation there. But the ones that are meaty from potential buyers, you better show up. Like, don't be, I'm not suggesting Kimia is like this at all, but don't think you're so great that you can't show up for the people who are potentially going to buy from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. I'm going to jump to a great question here from Dario, which is, do you think this can work with a company page as well?
It can, but here's the thing we can't overlook is, in the same way as I mentioned earlier, or let me ask you to kind of visualize this. When you're watching your favorite TV show and it cuts to the ad break, think about your conditioned response. Oh, ads, coffee. Or, oh, ads, mobile. Or, oh, ads, at the very least, disregard and switch off, right? And that's why they're louder and they're trying to get your attention. And it's the same when you're on your news feed. Scroll past posts, authentic posts, interesting posts, posts from someone I know, advert, disregard, promoted, disregard, sponsored post, disregard. You have a conditioned response to things that probably end up wasting your time or trying to take things from you, like your money. It's rare that you stop and buy. And it's a similar thing here. A company page, as opposed to a personal profile, does light up certain areas of the brain. Not always, but it can light up certain areas of the brain where it's like, yeah, but this is a business. So the trust factor is diminished compared to if it's a personal brand. Yes, it can work on the company page as well. If you, the hardest part with the company page is getting the ball rolling, getting momentum, getting people to show up. So post on it if you want, but I would say pretty much for everyone here, just post out of your own profile. And company pages don't get that kind of level of promotion and distribution than a personal page does, simply because people prefer the transaction being with a person rather than a company, even if the company page represents a solopreneur. My strong suggestion is lean hard onto your personal profile instead. It's just easier.
And it's really interesting. We've covered this in some of the other webinars, so worth checking them out if you haven't seen them, past ones. But, you know, we know that a personal brand has up to 10 times the reach of a company brand. But also, you know, companies should be advocating that particularly their salespeople, if not their entire workforce, build a personal brand, particularly on LinkedIn, because then their team can talk, they can advocate, they can answer questions, they can build connections. That is a much more powerful route to market than a business page pushing constant messages. So there's often fear around that. I know we've had lots of conversations with businesses who are terrified because they're worried their team are going to get poached or, you know, all sorts of things. But, you know, you've got to be confident that you look after your team well, and you've got to give them the freedom to be who they want to be, and particularly brand advocates on socials, because that's where the connection comes in, right?
And here's the huge irony, mostly for the dinosaurs who don't want to go near social because that's not what we do here, kind of thing. Those very same people close deals maybe on the golf course or over drinks. And it's like, you're doing exactly the same thing. What you're doing is closing deals because those people like you, because they get on with you. And yes, your product helps and all that kind of thing, but that's the device. And if you look at the psychology of it, they choose you because they think that you're a good guy, and, or, you know, you've got this, and it will make all the difference working with you because they trust you. It is no different. It happens to be online, but at scale. So it's hilarious to me when people say, oh no, we do things face to face. It's like, but it's the same. It's still people. It's just technically they're not in the room. So it absolutely is the same thing. And it's just amusing that it's still not being embraced. And you and I both know this from our experience of this. You know, we've come from a world where people are like, yeah, good one, the internet. But even now, most corporate social strategy is, well, you know, we post on Twitter, and that same white paper is then shared on LinkedIn. Hey, everyone, we're hiring. And it's like, that's it. And so there's so much more you can do. And it's still early. This is still the early days of it all. And there's a long way to go for companies to catch up even. So anyone using content on the personal profile on LinkedIn is at the bleeding edge of B2B social selling right now.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so we've got a question here. Do you recommend paying for a premium LinkedIn account so you're able to access better data on your lurkers?
Yeah, good question. So for those who don't know, LinkedIn has two ways it makes money: ads and subscriptions. And subscriptions forms the majority of it. There's actually 4 packages you can get. One is free. One is essentially premium business, it's called. Then there's Sales Navigator, and then there's the Recruiter one. And the idea of Sales Navigator essentially is a level of granularity, especially around businesses, so that you can create lists and, you know, spam them or create lists for whatever marketing. Recruiter is fairly obvious. That allows you access to a number of profiles. If you didn't have Recruiter and you're checking out, just looking at lots of profiles, you'll start getting throttled accounts. You'll start getting a little slap on the wrist. Maybe your usage, you can't access your account for 2 days or something like that because of overuse. Premium Business is spot on. People think I use Sales Navigator. I don't. I use Premium Business. It's also only like $50, I think, a month. So it's far cheaper. But the level of detail you can get and the reach and the awareness of who's looking at you is far stronger with that paid version. It's worth its weight in gold compared to the free one. If those who aren't sure, my advice is use the free one for a month consistently, then use the free trial of Premium Business for a month consistently and see the difference. And like the most powerful part, in my opinion, is when you look at profile views, so who's looked at your profile, the free version, you can see 3 days. Whereas the Premium Business one, you can see 90 days. And it's stuff like that. It's so worth it. And think about $50 a month, you should be able to close that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got a great question here from Georgina, which says, how can you empower colleagues or employees to put in the same time on social media in order to get the same results? Because this is tricky, isn't it? Not everybody is confident at putting their opinions or content even out there on social. How can we
It's a
encourage
good-
this in our
it's a
team?
good- this is stuff I get asked a lot, and for a lot of corporates are like, but what's the strategy to get everyone doing it?
Yeah.
And actually, the best strategy is you do it yourself and win, and then they will be more inclined to try it.
Yeah.
What we don't do is say, right, everyone, we're all going to do it together, because they're like, yeah, and I'll try and wiggle out of it. And what I tend to find is if I'm asked to do a talk to a company, say of 30 people, 10 of them won't bother because they're scared, which is fine. And 10 of them won't really stick at it. And then you'll have 10 who try it, and then maybe a few of them actually get somewhere, and that's it. So what's essential, this is just good leadership, is that you create champions. And it's best to start with yourself. And if you get results, then the next people around you are more inclined to do the same, and then so on. So piecemeal is a far better approach than it's now policy you have to post. To have to post. What I would add, though, is you can help them. So it might be like, look, here's some assets you could use. But a mistake is to say you will post this white paper or this bit of collateral on your personal profile. People should be expressing themselves with some fair guidelines based on not slandering others and so on, but essentially let them go play, get some guidance, obviously. But I feel that it's always better to lead by example and then let them fall in step afterwards, because you can say, look, it works really well. So get yourself working first.
Great advice. Okay, quick question here from Jake. So he says, I work with 2 music artists. They've got a good following on socials and are known locally where they're based.
Right.
But this doesn't convert into ticket sales. How can I make the followers which are hovering around convert into ticket sales and come down the show?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So there's a couple of ways to do it. One is you have something between passively consuming the content and the transaction of the sale. What most people try and do is stick the two together and say, hey, come and buy this ticket. And it's too much of a leap from cold, passive thumbing through the newsfeed to then get your wallet out. Okay. So in between, we need something to warm them a bit. So some kind of a lead magnet works really well.
Yeah.
Making it up as I go, Jake, here. But as an example, it might be listen to if you click on this link, you can listen to a clip of the latest tune, or there's going to be this special thing hot off the press that this musician is doing. Here's a little bit of it. So that lead magnet is something of a morsel to give them a teaser or a taste of what it's all about. They're going to have done something active in order to consume that, to go to that, say, landing page or bit of music or whatever. And now they're more in an active space. Should that be interesting enough, it is far easier then to suggest that they convert to a ticket. Alternatively, deploy people to, if they're getting plenty of engagement, for instance, deploy people to get in touch. Hi, I'm Team Jake, the musician, and I saw that you checked out his profile. Was there anything that grabbed your attention? Yeah, I love this. It was really cool. Okay, cool. Well, you realize he's got a gig near you in 2 days' time. Would you like to come along? Oh my God, that's great. So, you could just do that. And in my opinion, it's not efficient. But in business, sometimes it's better to be effective.
Yeah.
Do the manual one by one. And I remember I helped someone launch his course once, and he messaged individual messages to 50 people across an hour. He just sat there and ground it out. But then he made easily 5 figures that week as a result of conversions. It's that's worth it. You know what I mean? So I appreciate tickets are probably cheaper, but at the same time, it might be worth having something like that in play. So I hope there's a couple of examples there.
Yeah, that's some great examples. And, what we have to get across here is you do have to put the work in. This isn't a magic wand. We're not, you have to be willing to show up. You have to be willing to put the graft in to be able to get the conversions. They're not going to happen over an automated process or,
Exactly.
So, we've got to be there, right? We've got to be putting the effort in to get them.
That's why content should be posted consistently. It's not a campaign. It's all the time. That's the way you do it. And as you said earlier, content's not the job or even half the job. It's just the beginning. Content is the gravity that attracts people, but then you have to keep them in orbit and then pick them off. It's really essential.
Yeah. Okay. We've got time for a couple of more questions. Okay. So one here. I run a process technology business page and we don't get any comments and only a few likes. How can I convert the people who lurk in the background to view but don't do anything more?
Okay, two things. Firstly, we want this person to continually see our content, but we also want them to feel compelled without feeling pressured to engage in it. Okay. So on the first thing, we need them to see it, go engage with them. If you know they're there lurking, hey, I saw you were checking out the page. Just want to say thank you so much. So engage with no agenda outwardly. So we engage them and just say, like, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. How are you? It's a really good opener. And what happens then is like, oh, I'm really good, thanks. Is there anything in particular that's really stood out for you? Or anything I saw you looked at the post, or you checked it out this week, anything that caught your eye? Just some conversation. If you can always have the objective in mind of the point of this comment I'm writing, or the point of this message I'm sending is to stimulate a reply, then you'll get something back and forth a couple of times. Now LinkedIn's like, do you know what? Lisa needs to see more of this person's content then. And so they see it again. So that's job one done. But then the next part is, what would make, and just think about it for yourself, what would make that person want to write something? Now, we only ever write comments or engage with posts when it's one of two types of posts. One is we haven't a clue who they are, but it was like, wow, that blew my mind. That was compelling. That was emotional, stimulating, informative. So I feel I should write something, which is how distribution can really happen. Or it was a post of someone you like. So job one, obviously, your marketers need to produce epic content. We're in a world in 2022 where average and vanilla wallpaper style content, a quote from Maya Angelou isn't good enough anymore. Bring some original content. But also, they're going to want to naturally engage with your content if they think highly of you. Yeah. And one of the things I bear in mind when I'm engaging with people is, like, I need above all for them to think I'm a great guy. Yeah. And never before has being social been more practical for businesses. And what that really means is, do these people think you're great? Like, do they like hanging out with you? Yeah. So, like, you just be aware, like, think about people who are really good with other people in the moment. So they're the people in your team to pick to do this. The ones who can hold a crowd at a bar, for instance, the ones who are social hubs, they have awareness of nuance. And that kind of person is usually good at making others feel that they're awesome. Yeah. And so when they like hang out with you, they're like, oh, cool, Lisa's just posted, says they're subconscious, and they will naturally feel inclined to engage. And so the people that we really love, we don't even see the post. We just comment and support it because we love their stuff.
Yeah, interesting. And this is an anonymous post. I don't have a name of who put this question in, but also I would always say sense check your content, making sure that the content is exactly how Richard described it should be in the beginning. Deep dive into the people that you're trying to reach and make sure that you're talking, to their problems and their issues. And also, you mentioned that you're running a technology business page. Again, like we said before, get the team advocating, get people behind it as opposed to a business page. And that might really help there. Yes. Even if you post the content first and then people redistribute it on their personal or vice versa, just get your people involved. So that might really help.
I work with an engineer, and she was ex-Rolls Royce, in fact. And what she does so well is speak the language of the people she's trying to attract. And she doesn't go viral, but it doesn't matter, because the people she's trying to attract are like, well, this is great. This is the kind of thing I'm into. And just work your niche, speak to them rather than just trying to get volume because that makes you feel good.
Yeah, cool. One last question. I'm going to squeeze one last one in from Hannah. So can everything we've spoken about be done on Instagram in the same way for a B2C company?
It can. And the reason why is it's a human sport. Humans on Instagram are the same humans on LinkedIn. It's just the context they adopt when they're on that platform is different. And actually, there's a client I've got recently who said, I took your LinkedIn advice and just went and did it on Instagram, and I've closed the deal on it. So 100%. So, Hannah on Instagram is the same as Hannah on LinkedIn. However, she's probably got different reasons to be on there. But on top of that, she's still, like all of us, a human animal who responds to certain messages favorably, or her barriers would go up if messages are like, hey, do you want to buy something? So it does work, and it doesn't matter where you are. I did it on Facebook, then Instagram, and then LinkedIn. But the beauty of LinkedIn, especially B2B, is that the context is already there of business. Yeah. If people are looking at like travel photos and lunches, on Instagram, then selling, that the chat with the tech work is not going to be as conducive to success as being on LinkedIn.
Yeah, cool. Well, Richard, that has been unreal. I mean, there's a ton of questions we haven't got through. Where can people find you if they want to carry on the conversation, ask you some questions, follow you, see your content?
Well, there's this website actually called LinkedIn, and so you can find me there. So if you just go to linkedin.com/in and then Richard James Moore, all one word, I'm there. Or if you go to therichardmoore.com, that's the website. But yeah, happy to answer any questions, just as by way of thanks for having me on here. If anyone wants to ping me a DM, I gladly try and help as much as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to hear if anybody has tried this. Following this webinar, if you've taken Richard's advice, if you've gone now and started to look at some of those lurkers and started to follow that nurture process, please do keep us informed. Tag us on LinkedIn, get some posts out there, let us know how you found it, and if you get a deal, definitely let us know so we can help you celebrate it.
100%.
But yeah, absolutely. Well, Richard, that has been amazing. Thank you so much for giving up your time for us and for our lovely community. I think we could have talked probably for another hour, but we'll hold it there for today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for everyone for joining in. All these great questions as well. I really enjoyed it. So cheers, Lisa. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And if anybody's looking for any additional resources, particularly on the likes of personas and building strategies, there is a ton of free resource on the Fabric website as well. So you can find all sorts of goodies there. Otherwise, we will let you get on with your day. So enjoy the rest of Thursday, and we'll look forward to the weekend and seeing you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.